So please, once again, notice your mind be, be take a moment to be introspective and notice that your mind, you have a mind and that it has certain attitudes. And so trigger that mind with a motivation that you are here listening to these teachings in order to bring that mind to an understanding of its own true nature as the best possible way to benefit others. And so with that yearning for the wisdom of your own mind, wisdom on the one hand, and compassion for for sentient beings, infinite beings. On the other hand, then these two aspects, bring them into your mind as the motivation for listening to the teachings. Listening to the teachings is not so easy, and I don't mean even just hearing it, but listening to the teachings as a practice is difficult. We have to pay attention for a period of time, so we need to have an attention span, and we need to also then listen and absorb the words and try to bring the meaning behind the words with it into your mind. And of course, there's obstacles to that in the form of distraction, torpor, agitation, and then various afflictions of irritation and pride and envy and other afflictions. And so always try to maintain this looking in to see the qualities or the mood of the listener, you as the listener, and to cut through or break through these obstacles to having the teachings go in. Then at the end of the day, you'll have something to think about and reflect on. Then you can subject what you've heard to your own critique. You can doubt and so forth to become confident in the Buddha Dharma. Then and apparently only then can you actually integrate it into the full measure of your life. Otherwise, it's just a doctrine that you try to remember at various times in various circumstances. Okay, so saying that, and we just recited the Heart Sutra. It all seems very straightforward. I don't really have so much I could possibly add to that. So It's so straightforward. You know, Buddha Shakyamuni, all of the of course, during the Buddha's lifetime of quite a long life, he taught for many years to many different kinds of people, and all those teachings. I shouldn't say all those teachings, though we have with us even now in this 21st century. We have some of those teachings that have been maintained and even translated into our language. And the later commentators have sort of not divided, but they have classified those teachings, all the teachings, all the hundreds and hundreds, 84,000, let's say, teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha into two classifications. One is one is the sort of the story of Buddhism. And the stories of Buddhism, and then there's the actual intention of Buddha, what Buddha really meant. And so we have these sort of stories that Buddha taught, like discipline and generosity and love and compassion and patience and meditation and mindfulness and like the Jataka tales that are in the Vinaya. All these are just temporal stories. They're not actually what Buddha meant. They were just various approaches to implement in order to be able to understand or to realize what Buddha actually meant. And this Heart Sutra is one of these teachings that Buddha gave. This is what he really meant. And so in the sutras, it says, like this kind of a sutra, especially a person to teach this sutra is not in the domain of ordinary people. Really, you have to be some kind of a bodhisattva, a little bit more sophisticated or more noble bodhisattva to be able to actually teach and convey this meaning, this absolute meaning of what the Buddha taught. I think 6th or 8th level bodhisattva, something like that. But it is something that we have been reciting here at our center of Amrita for many years. wanted to put it into our regular liturgy. And then over the years, people have asked me about explaining it or teaching it and so forth, and I haven't really thought it was, that I say. I just put it off, basically. So I just put it off, but I thought now time is running out, so at least for my own, it would help me to understand it if I took a little time and did a little study on it, and see if it made any more sense to me. Of course, this sutra is part of quite a large portion of the Kanjur, which we say the Kanjur, which is the collection of Buddhist teachings. The Prajnaparamita, which is what this is part of this, and by the title, if we look at the title, it says Prajnaparamita Hridaya. Hridaya means heart, means essence. The essence of Prajnaparamita, and of course, Prajnaparamita means this wisdom. Has to do with wisdom that directly realizes things as they truly are. Wisdom that recognizes, what's that? Say phenomena. Phenomena means, I think phenomena means things. As they are means free from any extremes. Extremes meaning taking beyond any position. That's why it's called paramita. Paramita means transcendent. And paramita means to go to the other shore. Parudachimpa means to have arrived at the other shore. So that's the idea of transcendence. We also, it's become the nomenclature to call it the perfection of wisdom, or the perfection of the sublime knowing. Sublime knowing captures the literal prajna. Jna means wisdom or knowing, and pra means great. In Tibetan, it's shirap. She means to know, and rup means great or the best, knowing. So basically, it's the absolute truth. We say the absolute truth, ultimate truth, or the true nature of all phenomena, the wisdom that realizes the true nature of all phenomena. Sometimes it's the wisdom that realizes non-self. Or simply great emptiness. Shunyata, Mahashunyata. And again, it's the ultimate teaching of all the Buddha Dharma. We might we can even say that I think that this the teaching, this sutra, or the Prajnaparamita, is really where there is no distinction between the Buddha Dharma and everything. It's where you could say, people are always talking about, there's the Dharma, and then there's the ordinary life, and so forth, and but here it proves. So this what this sutra is presenting is proof that the Buddha Dharma is not separate from any aspect of our life. There's nothing that needs to be put together. With the Dharma. It's not separate at all. Most of the, just from the background of this sutra, most of the Prajnaparamita sutras were taught on Vulture Peak. At least most of the Prajnaparamita sutras that we have were taught on Vulture Peak, some sort of which is in India, very close to where Buddha attained enlightenment, at Bodh Gaya, not far from that place. And apparently, I don't know what the source is, but Buddha taught Prajnaparamita and other than human beings. He supposedly taught a great number of Prajnaparamita teachings to the what are called the Nagas. He's kind of half kind of beings in some other realm. But we have in our collection, present day, this Heart Sutra, which is, except for the mantra, Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisattva, which is short. You notice if you read the sutras, there's the Buddha teaching in a discursive way, and then he'll repeat those teachings in a verse and verses, probably for easy memory to remember again. And then even those verses it will essentialize into a mantra called a dharani. And they say in the Prajnaparamita. Of course, we have that one. There's other mantras, but here in the Heart Sutra, that's the real mantra of the Heart Sutra, or the mantra of the heart of Prajnaparamita. And then even more concise is the sound ah. That is the most essentialized form of Prajnaparamita teaching. Ah. It seems like the teachings of the Prajnaparamita were compiled subsequent by bodhisattvas, Manjushri, Maitreya, Avalokiteshvara, amongst others. Then later, and for our particular tradition from Buddhism, when it spread up through the Himalayas, then the King Sonsen Gampo invited many pundits, scholars from India to Tibet. And there were also, since the time of his predecessors, several generations of predecessors, starting with the Songtsen Gampo, the king of Tibet, who saw to it that there was a written language created in order to translate the Buddha Dharma. And then when Tristan Detsen built the Same monastery, then there were, by that time in Tibet, hundreds of translators and scholars. And then these pundits and the translators undertook the mission of translating everything that was available in India, or everything that could be brought to Tibet to translate from India. By that time, the Buddha Dharma was translated and was in Sanskrit. Buddha Shakyamuni, of course, he didn't speak Sanskrit. He didn't speak Pali. This is before those languages developed. But then this one language called Prakrit, if you're interested. Prakrita was most likely something like at that time 500 BC. And then later it was translated into the indigenous languages that developed in India, like a Pali, and then later into Sanskrit. And then those Sanskrit libraries were both at Vikramasila University and at Nalanda University. And those pundits from those places went to Tibet and probably brought texts with them also. And for every project, there was a Tibetan translator and an Indian pundit, minimum. They always had one translator, Tibetan translator, and one Indian pundit, and then they would work collaboratively with other translators. The main translator was Vairochan, the Tibetan translator Vairochan. It didn't translate this one, but the main pundit was Vimalamitra. And so they headed up this whole project and then translated this and other Prajnaparamita texts, teachings. There's this one, is the heart essence of the wisdom. Then there was the eight, I don't want to say this, I don't remember all the different ones. There's 8,000, 10,000 lines, 100,000 lines. So I remember hearing that I heard, read or something, that the king sent one smart Tibetan person to India to find and memorize the 100,000 lined Prajnaparamita, and then he did that, and he returned, and then they translated it. There were during that time, early translation school time, from Guru Padmasambhava. Guru Padmasambhava was sort of the supreme head of Buddhism then, but they had what were called the mother and son Prajnaparamita texts, called the seven. They all came together into 17 mother and son Prajnaparamita texts. So, okay, so so when Buddha taught this, he taught it to many types of individuals, and I guess we could say it was assumed that, I mean, this is what's called this the beginning of the second turning of the wheel. Quite soon, a month or so after Buddha's enlightenment, then he turned the wheel for the first time in Sarnath, Deer Park. And he taught, as we know, began teaching the basic approach of the path to awakening. And some years later, as the development of his disciples matured, then he turned the wheel of the Dharma a second time. And this was the Prajnaparamita period, or class of teachings. So who he was teaching, like say, were people who had some background in the previous teachings. And so there's some things that perhaps when we read this, there's some assumption that the terminology that's used here has been already thoroughly thought out by the listeners. And so what we can do here, again, would be to go over some of the terminology that Buddha used to point out this wisdom of the true nature of phenomena. And that's called, it would be helpful, I think, to have some understanding of what we call the Abhidharma. Abhidharma. It's all of the teachings of Buddha are also gathered into three baskets, three pitakas. Well, there's the pitaka of the Vinaya Pitaka, and there's the Sutra Pitaka, and then there's the Abhidharma Pitaka, a basket of teachings that Abhidharma, we can say, the Tibetan Munsha means Abhidharma. Of course, here Dharma means things. As you know, sometimes Dharma means Buddha's teachings. But also Dharma has other meanings. Quite a few other meanings, like 10 different meanings. It can mean your duty, responsibility, your duty. But here it means phenomena. When we say phenomena, is a long word. It means Dharma means phenomena. Abhidharma means Abhi, or in Tibetan means to it's like say here we could say it means like to sort of shine the light on what was not known or not seen before. That's the meaning of Abhi, or of Mun in Tibetan. It means it's to make evident what wasn't evident. So it's not, so that's what the Abhidharma is. It talks about phenomena, karma, impermanence, and so on and so forth. Okay, so maybe this will be made clear. All the sutras, I think of Buddha Shakyamuni, maybe said when the teachings are compiled, each teaching should have a title, and it should begin with this line here, which here, thus have I heard, or thus I heard. Have I heard? Thus have I heard. No, thus I heard. I think I have heard. So, thus I have heard. All right, so you look in sutras, it's always, thus I have heard. Thus have I heard. Thus I have heard. Say it, it's a little bit archaic. But, and also, thus I've heard at one time. So there's a time. And in Vulture Peak, or in the Deer Park, or different places. So there's always this mention of these five, what are called the five excellences. the excellent teacher, the excellent listeners, the excellent topic, the excellent time, and the excellent place. And so here when we say thus, refers to Buddha. Even refers to like this, the 1,002 Buddhas that will appear during this time. And the fourth Buddha was Buddha Shakyamuni. And so he is here the perfect teacher. And then I here refers to the students, the disciples, those who were gathered. Or the one who remembered it. It's Ananda. There's some categories of sutras, or here there's Manjushri. And usually there were always the present when the Buddha taught, those who were holders of the 4 levels of ordination. We're surrounded by 100 or surrounded by multitudes of monks, and four families of those who hold ordination have to do with the men and women who hold monastic or lay vows. That makes 4. Laymen or monk men, lay women or none. Monk means men always. Yeah. So then here it says accompanied by an enormous sangha of monks, always have monks, and an enormous sangha of bodhisattvas. Also bodhisattvas. And some sutras, we can read all these Mahayana sutras, astonishingly, astonishing. But they'll list pages and pages of the names of bodhisattvas. So at one time, the transcendent and accomplished conqueror means Buddha was abiding on Vulture Peak in Rajagriha, which is, like I say, it's in that mountain in Magadha, central India, accompanied by an enormous sangha of monks and an enormous sangha of bodhisattvas. Thus I, and then have heard, and the perfect teachings are the second turning of the wheel of the Prajnaparamita teachings. That is, the teachings that are concerned with revealing the true nature of samsara and nirvana. Say that. And so then Buddha, so here the main actors in this sutra are the Buddha Shakyamuni, and then the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, and the and Shariputra. Shariputra is the one who poses the question to Avalokiteshvara, and even though since we are familiar with this, I don't have to wait. But it seems like a Buddhist, he's in meditation. He's in a particular meditation called Lama. It's the profound state of profound perception. Which is it was abiding in this state that recognizes the true nature of all phenomena. And when a Buddha, according to the kind of intention that the Buddha is displaying by engaging in, I mean, it's not like Buddha was meditating. Enlightened mind doesn't meditate. There's no meditation. It's just where the intention, how the Buddha is relating, so to speak, to phenomena. And so here it's thought how and you read in sutras, Mahayana sutras like this, the Buddha is abiding in a certain samadhi, and that elicits rays of light that shine forth from the form of the Buddha, that bodhisattvas and those who have more subtle perception can see. And sometimes the beginning of the sutra will be where a Buddha is abiding in some samadhi, and some light rays will go out to something, and one bodhisattva will stand up and say, what is that? What is the cause of that? Or what was the intention of those light rays? And then he'll elaborate, in some distant realm, and so on and so forth. So like that. So ordinary people, we wouldn't see that. It would just be this Buddha very resting and equipoise. And then there's at the same time, then Avalokiteshvara, who's also here, Avalokiteshvara, not here, but Avalokiteshvara. Here, there's this term called a Bodhisattva Mahasattva, always when they refer to Avalokiteshvara in the what is it in English? The great and greatest Bodhisattva, the exalted. Yeah, here in the Sanskrit, they call him Bodhisattva Mahasattva, which means he's a Bodhisattva, but Mahasattva, of course, a Bodhisattva, Bodhi means enlightenment, enlightened. Sattva means, indicates courageousness. And then Mahasattva means, basically it means that it wasn't just a Bodhisattva, he was actually an enlightened being. Looked like a Bodhisattva, pretending to be a Bodhisattva, something like that. And since we can see what I was getting to is how Buddha didn't speak, all the speaking happened between Avalokiteshvara, from Avalokiteshvara. So there's this idea of that the Avalokiteshvara's mind and the Buddha's enlightened mind were not separate. It was this mind-to-mind teaching. Okay, I don't think I'll go into too much here. And then Shariputra, he was there sort of as the questioner, as he often is. Sometimes he's, because Shariputra was actually Buddha Shakyamuni's chief disciple. Chief disciple. He and Modgalyayana, we can see, are Shariputra's on the Buddha Shakyamuni's right. When you see renderings of it, paintings, and then Modgalyana is on the left. Shariputra was a very wise person, and he kind of embodies the wisdom qualities of a perfect disciple. And then Modgalyayana had the kind of the power, enlightened power, I guess you could say. But anyway, here he's the Arhat. So you have the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, and the Arhat. Shariputra, we have these lines. There's these lines. All phenomena has a cause, and when Shariputra and Modgalyayana, they were teammates, or not teammates, but yeah, they were seekers together. They decided to, I think they were both at a carnival, and Shariputra says, "Oh, this is so depressing, you know. Like I really want to get away from all of this." And he talked to his friend, and his friend said, "Yeah, me too. This is really, it's so empty and so useless, so meaningless. They got melancholic, and it was just so much." And so then they searched, and they both went together, and they made a link. He said, whoever finds enlightenment or first comes to the other one. If they find an enlightened teacher, then they go to the other one, and then they'll go together. And so they did that. They both studied with different masters that were in India at that time, just during the time of Buddha Shakyamuni. And then Shariputra met this one Asija, I think. I don't know the name. I'm not going to look it up. Anyway, he met one of Buddha's very accomplished disciples, and he was struck by his composure and so forth, and he asked him. He went up to him and asked him about what he understood. And he said, "Well, my teacher teaches how every phenomena has a cause, and that the cessation of that he teaches." And these four lines, these two phrases, just completely tripped his mind over. And I think some people say that the first line, or he became a stream winner. It's one of the Arhat paths. And then by the second line, he became a no returner. And then he went and told his friend, and then they both went to Buddha Shakyamuni and took ordination. And then Shariputra attained Arhat, and 2 months later, maybe, I'm sorry, now all this teachings kind of go on record and will follow me in the bardo, but so I can't remember. But anyway, very quickly, he attained awakening as an Arhat. And then the Buddha also made him, the two of them, his chief disciples, and just in a few weeks, which caused a lot of rumble amongst the community, I'm sure. But Buddha said, well, it's not because of favoritism or anything like that. It's because of their previous aspiration was to become, not to become enlightened, but to become the best disciple, or something like this. I don't remember exactly anymore. But anyway, so he made them their chief disciples because it was their karma, not the Buddha's decision. And so then, particularly Shariputra was the one he was the student of Buddha Shakyamuni to give ordination to other people, to new people. And he would give teachings. And he was the model. He was the one that everyone, like Buddha would probably say, like, be like him, be like Shariputra. So he was somebody who was emblematic of a perfect disciple. And in the sutras, he appears, sometimes he's sort of the one who represents someone who has not a complete view, kind of the Hinayana view. And then the teachings are to convert him, to convert meaning to teach him the supreme view, like that idea. But here he's just asking how should any man or woman proceed who wishes to engage in the profound way that Prajnaparamita, how do we practice the Prajnaparamita, which is an amazing question. It's amazing to even have a question like that. Then there's all this. I took some notes. So then the body of the sutra takes the form of Avalokiteshvara, discussing all the ways that emptiness is known. So he's not talking here about like methods that we have to figure out how to implement. That's why I say he's talking about life. In the Hinayana, or in the earlier teachings of Buddha, he taught in such a way that those arhats, or the process of disciples knowledge unfolding was such that they would understand things, phenomena, to be made up of parts, almost like we think of, like the way a scientist who has access to technical devices that enable them to see that things aren't the way they appear. In other words, things have cells and atoms, things like that. And this is what the Buddha and his group and people were interested in. Like when we talk about the nature of reality, we're not talking about an alternative universe that we need to discover and learn. It's about stuff. It's about our things. And that's what the Prajnaparamita is referring to, not something other than what we are experiencing now. But we are only experiencing it superficially. And I guess it's only because of having certain cognitive capacities and a little bit different, or a little bit more of a broader dimension of mental capacity, that we're able to, or how do I say, otherwise maybe there's not much difference between the people and animals. But if we, and this is what Buddha is inviting us to do, if we can look deeper at our life, we'll discover the truth. And that truth, it's not just that we get something and now what are we going to do with it? It's that the closer we get to truth, the freer we are of our problems. And the whole point of Buddha's teachings was to become free, to become problem-free, pain-free, not suffer. That was the compassion of Buddha. That was the motivation of Buddha, was to become free of suffering, not to create some doctrine with handy slogans. Everything that Buddha taught should be understood to be in the light of freeing from suffering. That's why the Prajnaparamita is the absolute truth, where it's complete freedom from suffering. So it's the main teaching is, of course, shunyata, emptiness. That is the term that's used to indicate the true absolute nature of everything. And so we could, what I'm talking here is the dividing this topic up into one way of looking at it is from the ground, the path, and the fruit. And the ground here indicates our present samsaric life. And the Buddha says, O Shariputra, those who wish to engage in the Prajnaparamita should see with precision as follows. How do we practice Prajnaparamita, we should see that their 5 mind-body aggregates are empty of self-nature. That's how you will realize, basically, that's the path to enlightenment, is to see your skandhas as emptiness. So I think we'll take a short break, and then we'll talk about what it is, what the skandhas are. If we're supposed to see their emptiness, first we have to see them, right? Then see their emptiness. So we'll take a break. Okay. Okay. Okay, so so in the Abhidharma, and then here, there's this term aggregates, or in the Sanskrit is called skandhas. And the Buddha use that term for 5 different aspects. There are 5, you could say 5 skandhas. Skandhas means a heap, like a heap, like a rice, like a pile. Basically, we could say that a sentient being is a pile of things put together. That's what an aggregate is, a conglomeration of things that make up. Here it would be make up, like, what is a sentient being? A sentient being is a pile, is an aggregation. And of course, in basic Buddhism, Buddha taught, even the first turning of the wheel was that clinging or conceiving that the skandhas, that this aggregation implies that there is an owner, is the cause of suffering. Like here it says, interestingly, I just noticed, it says, they should see precisely correctly that there are 5 mind-body aggregates. That's the thing. Right now, we think we have this life. And it's not that life is a problem, it's that thinking that it is my life that is the root of the problem, the cause of all suffering, it says here, the foundation of samsara. You could say there's no such samsara is the experience of one who has these five skandhas. The first skandha, and that's what here it talks about, they should see that their five mind-body aggregates are empty of self-nature. The self-nature, that's a key point here. And then he says, form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. So that's the that's the first aggregate that is discussed, that Avalokiteshvara mentions. And it's because it's so aligned with ignorance, it's conventionally presented first. Form, the form aggregate, rupa skandha. And what form here means are all those various material aspects that make up a sentient being. It's the aggregation of all visible forms. And to be, in the Abhidharma, then they discussed 15 different 15 different kinds of forms. So sometimes these kinds of things are helpful to have as a framework. And these forms are the root of all visible phenomena. On a gross level, and then there's a subtle level. But we can divide form up into causal forms and result forms. And of course, there's four causal forms, which are the four major elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And then there are the resultant elements. Well, okay. Just thinking in terms of, we all know, then there's these four great elements. The earth element, which accounts for solidity, and then a water element, which accounts for the adaptability. Water, all the water in the universe has the quality of, just like earth has a quality of stability. So if your mind is very stable, then we think that it's the mind that gives rise to the elements. The elements don't exist outside the mind. The mind is actually the source of everything. So the stability of mind is its earth quality that manifests outwardly as gross solidness in things that don't allow you to go through them. plain and simple as an earth element. There's no actual earth element, is there? Somewhere. And the same, like a water element is the adaptability. Water, what I say, it levels itself. It moves in a way that it adapts to circumstances. Mentally, we have that quality. The mind is adaptable. That's how we've evolved over billions of lifetimes. We adapt to the karma of being reborn in the hell realm. Mind is very we're very willing, to do that, So that kind of motility, I guess you would say, the water element, and then heat, the gestation quality, that quality of warmth, mental, that emotionally warm. And then there's the air. Anyway, there's these 4 elements that are empty. Like we say, they don't, where is the earth element? Is it rocks, mountains? Like, where is the earth? There's no real such thing as a earth element. It's a label. We even have this English, I don't know if it's just English, but we call the earth is this ball, this stone, this rock. We give it the name of the element earth. I don't know if that's, I don't know other languages, whether it's corresponding to the element earth or not, but there's no, there is solidity, there is all the qualities of the earth element, but you'll never find the earth element. You'll never find the water element or the fire element or the air element. But yet you can't deny that those qualities exist in a way. Then, so these are called the form, the skandha, form skandha. So that's one contemplation, actually, is to we contemplate these, the non-existence of these things as an antidote, not that there are no such thing as earth element. That's not the purpose. Like I say, Dharma also is always to reduce suffering. And so we can, if we cling to things as actually having a correspondence in reality, then we have to antidote that. We need to to do the opposite, contradict that. And we contradict it by saying it doesn't exist. We're not saying there's no such thing as Earth. That's different than saying the Earth does not exist. One is the antidote to thinking that there actually is something there that exists, that is always there as Earth. That solid things contain the Earth element. How do I say it differently? So they should see precisely, correctly, and intimately. That means examining, analyzing, and looking below the surface of the skandhas, basically. Prove it. If there's such a thing as the earth element, prove it. Can you prove it? So that's it, like that. I say again, I'm repeating myself, but as Buddhist practitioners, we should regularly remind ourselves, all we want to know is the truth. We don't want to become something or enlightenment or all this stuff. We just want the truth. And being willing to accept as fact what Buddha accomplished is the beginning of the path. And it is expressed as what we call refuge. It's just a willingness to accept what Buddha experienced and then, of course, subsequently taught as fact. And it's not leaving it at that, but it's proving it for yourself. It's like Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, that everything is problematic. Everything is problematic. But he didn't say that as a credo, as a doctrine. He said, everything is suffering, prove it for yourself. So anyway, so these four causal forms are to be seen as emptiness. Like when you don't discover that something exists, you have discovered its empty nature. And then there are 10 resultant forms, 5 of which are subjective, which are kind of our faculties: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. Ear, nose, tongue, body. And then objective, subjective results of the elements, and that is those who experience the elements, and then those who the forms themselves, the visible forms, or the visible, or the, let's say, or it's light and sound and smell and taste and touch. And then there's one other kind of form that is called, of course, these are all, I guess you could say visible, and even like sound and things like that. They're all, what's that word, like gross, I guess, or knowable in that way, or touchable almost. But then there's another category of form, rupa, that is imperceptible. And it has to do with things like, it's like an energy or a power or ability that influenced you. The classic example is when you take vows. That's a rupa aspect. That's a rupa skandha. That's a form. Taking vows. It's like a thing that affects you, just as if somebody pinched you. In the same way, it's that imperceptible form, or some special ability you may have, or power. Sometimes even like a position, a title or a position is can act as a form, skandha, is imperceptible. When you make a firm decision, that can fall into that category of a form, skandha. But so these are all aggregations. They're aggregates. Even time is a subtle form. It's an aggregation of the beginning, the middle, and the end. And each one of those can be further, even like the beginning has the beginning of the beginning, and the duration of the beginning, and the end of the beginning. So that's aggregation, means that there's no overall thingness to something, that it's all just the aggregation of parts, giving the impression of a entity. It's like if you draw a picture and you use material, colored materials, things, pigment, paint stuff, oil or whatever. And so then you have the idea, there's an image there, or maybe not an image, but some abstract concept on a material form of a canvas that evokes some kind of a reaction, anyway, an emotion or something. But actually, it's just paint and canvas and a wood and spoons of colors. There's no meaning within those. It's an aggregation that creates a certain illusion, just like a movie. A movie, all very carefully designed to not, it's all carefully, like I guess the skill of a director is to put together, to aggregate this team that can put together this aggregation of voices and sounds and images and so forth that gives you the or that takes away your ability to see that none of it exists, that nothing's really happening, that people actually aren't going through these things that they're dramatizing. it's all just pretend. And the better a director is, the more they convince you that it's real. So this is the idea of aggregation of things that give an impression that we think is real. And it's very easy. Now we have all kinds of technology and science, so it's not far-fetched for us to understand that what appears superficially to be solid, if we think about it, or even instrumentally, I know, what's that, not instrumentally? Yeah, instrumentally, look with instruments. Maybe that's different. We look with instruments, we can see that the solidity of that table is destroyed when we look closer. And we see that it's just strip fibers, say. Like this pattern on this brocade looks a certain beautifully way, but then when we look, it's just lines of thread. There is no flower. And even those lines of thread, if you took those lines of thread and were able to look closer and closer, you just get smaller and smaller particles with maybe different names. You know, they invent names, you know, like quarks and, well, my generation, it was like the big deal was atoms. You know, that was the smallest particle of matter was an atom. That's what we learned. And then but that was all. But they said that's the smallest particle, but yet they still said, well, it has two things in the middle and one going around it. So already they kind of, then what about those things? Well, those are also made up of parts, and on and on. So for the Arhat realization, they realize that level of non-self, where everything is just made up of what are called subatomic, what do they call it? Indivisible subatomic particles. Indivisible subatomic particle, or I guess you could say partless particles. But there are partless particles. And that's what, to those people, that's what the Buddha, that's what Avalokiteshvara is educating them to look further. Those partless particles also have no inherent nature. They're empty of self-nature. Five-body aggregates are empty of self-nature. They don't have some self-identity. They are empty of. Something. It's not emptiness. Sometimes the word emptiness, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You know, we could always complain about, you know, the shortcomings of English, and they don't capture the, you know, Sanskrit or whatever. But, you know, emptiness works. The problem is that we think of emptiness as sort of the opposite of full. Empty and full. Emptiness actually means full. It means everything. Then if you think something actually exists, then you're talking about other things, you know, like you're taking up space. That space then doesn't exist. So we should think in terms of emptiness, shunyata, as being a workable term. Emptiness. Essence. I think ness might mean essence. So when we discover the essence of something, or the very core of its being, there is none. It's empty of essence. That's the essence. That's the emptiness that's discovered. And in proportion to our discovery of that is the reduction of our suffering. The truth is what liberates us, right? Ignorance is the cause of suffering. Truth is freedom from suffering. Truth doesn't cause anything. This truth that we're talking about here, this absolute truth, prajnaparamita, is got nothing to do with causation. It's completely free. You've transcended cause and effect. It's the mere absence of ignorance and everything that ensues from ignorance. And ignorance is also non-existent. It is emptiness. We'll get to that. So form, anyway, I want to see, this is a form kaya. So we can just sometimes just sit down and analyze something that you think that it's a form. Particularly, we can analyze our body. That's the closest thing. And it's also very beneficial to periodically. I always, tell people that are trying to do, who want to become Vajrayana practitioners, that really you need to do this. You need to examine form to really get off the ground with the phases of Vajrayana practice. I mean, this Prajnaparamita, they say, is the essence of the Mahayana and the foundation of Vajrayana. So use your ability to examine things to find your body. And you have this sense that you have a body that is really, it's only parts. It's something made up of parts. It's a label that you put on the sum of parts. And if you identify, if you actually apply that to how you feel about owning this body or being this body, we can't help but think that I and my body are so aligned, they're so integrated with each other that they must, I don't know, they're like a permanent couple that cohabit. And of course, so we should be able to look at our body and separate it from our mind. It's not our mind. Our body and our mind are not the same thing. So we need to prove that to ourselves. Body and mind are not the same thing. That's the axiom, or that's the goal is to prove that. I mean, if body and mind were the same thing, I don't want to go too far, then everything you'd think, your body would go there. Like how you can think of New York, or you can think of downtown, but here your body is here. They're not the same thing. It's not that, and you're anyway, many different approaches here, but the idea is to come to separate your body from your mind so that you can analyze to see if even your body exists in its own right, from its own side. Does your body exist? We think it does because it acts up, it gets hungry, it gets cold, gets hot, gets tired, and all those effects, tiredness, suffering, pain, aches, and so are really not experienced by the body. They're experienced by the mind. That's not the body. Body is like, and you can look back at the teachings of Shantideva, teaching very elaborately and clearly how to relate to the form kaya of your body, the form skandha of your body, how to analyze your body and see that it is, no matter how much you label things, that basis for that label, like, oh, I have a body, of course I have a body. I'm not denying that I'm not saying I don't have a body. I'm saying I do have a body, and this body exists. And it's just, but it doesn't, but it's just a label for other things. It's really a label for 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. Like if you could say, well, a body is actually not something. It's 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso, and a head. And you can use the term body functionally, but we need to understand that there's no correspondence to that label. It's empty. It doesn't have a match. What we mean by body is a head, this aggregation of these 6 parts. Then, well, you have a head. Where's your head? You throw around the term, I have a headache. Like, well, what do you mean head? Where's your head? Well, okay, I don't have a head. I've got the skull, stretched skin, whole, eyes, nose, tongue, ears, brain, top of the spinal stick thing. That's my head. There's no head. It's a label that has no basis. Oh, each one of those. Well, little I means what? Oh, it's this little slimy little thing, a thing that is liquid, and this is, they all have names. All the parts of an I have names, but none of those parts is I, and so on and so forth, even to the point where what molecules and osmotic pressure and all these subtle activities that are going on, that even those things can be reduced further and further and further. And here, that's what you do. You reduce things down again and again till you realize that, or till you come to the point where there's labels, but there's no basis for those labels. And don't confuse labels with things. Labels maybe serve for social function. Like my body, I'm going to build a door, and that door needs to be big enough for my body to go through. That's what, so then we have that. but to leap to the conclusion that there is actually a body that has its own body nature is ignorance. Ignorance. So every second that we spend analyzing to find, analyzing this skandha, every second that we spend doing that cuts ignorance. So I think that's why it's good to do this, like I was saying, 2-3 times a week. If you, yeah, 15-20 minutes or something to just analyze like that and come up with not finding. And when you come up with not finding, then don't just throw your hands up in the air, but then just sit and sort of accept. Accept. It's a form of patience. You know? Be patient in the face of not finding the object that you were seeking. Yeah, like that. So that's the rupa of form. And then on a subtle level, there's this infinite combination of infinite subatomic particles and interdependent display. Which causes all this to occur, all these causative and resultant aspects of form on the subatomic or infinitesimal, infinite, constantly. Okay, then the next of here, it says form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, and form is not other than emptiness. So these are four, these are, you know, I think from logic, they're called axioms. You know? Axioms. Form is empty. We just discussed that. And I said how you can go about using your ability to know by applying it to knowing whether or not there are actually forms. So by analyzing, meaning examine and take apart and see when you come to the self-identity, the nature of something. And you won't get there, but it's not knowing the answer, it's doing the work, is what undermines ignorance. Then emptiness is form. Form, emptiness is not parallel to form. It's not that you make something empty that wasn't empty until you make it, until you add emptiness to it. Emptiness doesn't exist other than form. That's why I worry people sometimes. You read a sutra like this and then you sit and meditate on emptiness. That's not if you want to understand emptiness, you meditate on form and see the empty nature of form. There is no such thing as emptiness to meditate on. You can use that term in certain contexts, but here it says, emptiness is form. And Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. It's not something that exists, that we need to abandon thinking that form doesn't exist and then discover emptiness. And then the fourth is form is not other than emptiness. So these constitute all the possibilities of how to see things. These are when we say, "Oh, absolute nature is beyond all extremes." So extremes means thinking, or yeah, it means, I say thinking. Thinking things are real is an extreme thought. Philosophically, denying the existence of things is an extreme thought, nihilism. So things don't exist. So these four, you can apply these four axioms to your life or to everything. That's why I say here's where Buddha Dharma and your life are never separate. And understanding the emptiness of form will begin to trickle down, or will begin to spill over into other aspects, as we see here. The next one, it says here, form is emptiness. In the same way, sensations, perceptions, conditioning factors, and modes of consciousness are empty. So the second one is sensations, right? What is it called? Sensations? Sensations. Yeah, sometimes these are going to be a little different. Sensations. Vedana. That's now we're moving into the mental sphere more. That's I think Gunther translated it as feeling tone, which is more probably, that makes, feeling tone. So it's that component of our dualistic perception that produces a response about an object of perception when contact is made. It's that feeling tone component when contact is made to an object, when we, in our perception. And it's the experience, it's where we begin to experience things as being pleasant or unpleasant or neutral and indifferent, or neutral, say. And typically, sentient beings react to sensation, that sensation. It's just that initial sensation of pleasant, unpleasant, that can produce a klesha, can produce a mental affliction, which then functions as as this fourth skandha, the formations, and basically to further one's conditioning further one's stay in samsara, further one's experience of samsara. We produce samsara. Samsara is a production. We produce it every instant. It's produced by the skandhas, most of which, as we should begin to discover, is mind. So these sensations are one of the prime causes in the production of cyclic existence. It also appears, and we won't have time, but later in that is 12 links of causation. It gets its own spot in that system also. So it's very important. So again, you apply the same methodology, the same introspective power to recognize that empty nature of pleasant and unpleasant when they arise in response to an object, or in response to, basically in response to what typically we take as our world. Mostly when we think of our world, we think in terms of the outer material world. But according to Buddha and the teachings, most of what's going on is the inner world. Okay, so then moving on to so we can say then sensations is empty. Emptiness is sensations. Sensations is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than that sensation that you're having. So in contemplation, introspective contemplation like this, you are not having that sensation. You are experiencing sensation. But there's no, wrong. There is just sensation. There's no experiencer. So if you can examine the pleasant or unpleasant experience, if you can examine it, it does not require that you also own it. In fact, for the Arhat level training, that's their realization of non-self, is that there is no owner for all of this phenomena. They still haven't quite undermined the existence of, the self-nature of phenomena. I haven't realized that quite yet. So here in the Mahayana, Buddha, in the second turning of the wheel, pulled the rug out from just thinking that everything is, and things don't have their own nature. They're just made up of particles. So now he's saying even those particles don't have their own existence. Okay, so that's form and sensation. And then the next one is perception, or conception, or perception. Here it says perception. Also, you see, it can be conception. It's not, this is one that's a little bit tricky. But it's that aspect of dualistic mind's function that creates and works with the it's that it's the hmm. It's not a thing like pleasant or unpleasant. It's the process that we use in dealing with those things. Conception or perception is sort of a power. This term, people use this term agency these days. I have to think about that. Isn't that as a we need to discover our agency, or something like that use of that term is becoming more. I've heard people use that, and it makes sense. And the context they're using, I'm not sure if it might mean this skandha or not, but it's sort of the building blocks of working with the mind, using concepts to deal with the perceptions of our world. And it's also the process of that results in remaining in a conceptual version of our world rather than the direct perceptions that could lead out of cyclic existence. So it's more of a I don't like to use energy too much, but it's that kind of thing, that kind of, it's impulses. Yeah. It's the multitude of, it's like the aggregation of impulses that make up the tendency to create and cling to distinctions that we make, to pleasant, unpleasant. Everything's built upon concepts and judgment, not on objectively existing independent realities. So what is that? I'll sell my cabbage twice. It's the all the impulses that make up our tendencies to create and cling to distinctions. I'll say it a couple of different ways because these are just notes here, right? So everything is built on concepts and judgments, not on objectively existing independent realities. We make up our own world, and that the agent, I want to try out agencies to do that. Is that, I'm not sure if that's going to work. And the labeling and clinging. It's a subconscious process. It is a subconscious level of conception. That's why conception, perceptions, interchangeable. Mind, we can see that our mind follows unconscious habitual patterns, assigning names and to experiences. So we keep fabricating a world of mental objects which can't be said to have any substantial existence outside of our judgment mind. Some of these conceptions are, I say, born with us, meaning that they're habitually, we continue with them, that we're born with, and others are added by our upbringing or our culture or society or environmental and outer factors. But we live by judgments that solidify and add certainty to basically a nameless, ever-changing world. None of those labels are owned by those to whom or whatever we assign them to. We think of a tree, the tree doesn't have that name, or it doesn't have the concept that you have when you think of a tree. We think of a tree, I said tree, now everybody think of a tree, and it's not going to be the same tree probably. And in French, Aubert, that kind of tree. What is German? Palm, I think. Different kind of tree. Tree is like telephone pole. Anyway, so these are all things to do with conception, perception, conception. They're the building blocks of dualistic thinking. What do people do say? They're the currency of dualistic thinking. So the previous feeling is a feeling of pleasant or unpleasant. Then how that all, the machinery of all that is the perceptions, the conceptions. And then that leads to the fourth skandha. And again, now it gets more and more subtle. And so it gets more difficult to discover. I mean, that's what we're doing. We need to, the Buddha taught these, again, not as a doctrine, but as, okay, the skandhas are empty. There's two things we need to know. One, we need to know what the skandhas are, how we have them, and how they are another word for samsara. They are another word for the cause of suffering. And second, we need to know their nature. Emptiness. So those are two things we need to know about the skandhas. We don't have to discover them and then get rid of them. But we do have to discover them and then continue in that discovery by as directly as possible understanding their emptiness. It's like this conception, it's like like the example of a tree, like we were saying, or when we learn to read, we learn to read, that really, I'm definitely a believer in reading, but it is an example of this skandha, how we create, like we see a picture of a tree in a book, like what kind of a tree, what's the picture? Or here, like the example of, like A for alligator, B for beaver, bunny. So you learn when you see a bunny that it's that it has a word. You see an image of an animal, a bunny, a rabbit, and then you learn the word rabbit. And if you say like rabbit, then they say that's wrong. Or rabbit. This is bringing up my own elocution lessons, you know. Rabbit, rabbit. You know, you're either right or wrong. You know, you're given this conceptual framework, so that when you see a rabbit, when you see this animal, that it itself doesn't think of itself as a rabbit, but it's my concept on it. So I can see that rabbit and think rabbit, and then I can think of all the torture of how to say the word rabbit, and all the teachers that taught me not to say wabbit. You know, those are that movement and everything. That's conceptual. That's the perceptual. Yeah, that's the kind of the currency of samsara. The petrol. No, maybe the engine. That's also, you know, racism. Talk about racism and all those prejudicial areas, you know, that where it's just so, it's not conscious. It goes deeper than that. So to see that, and then to see its emptiness, that's the thing. And apply the same 4 axioms also. I mean, it's not, you know, we can become, what do you say, agile, dexterous in our examination ability. Typically, I don't know, school, I don't run down the schools again, but, you know, there is this tendency to not really learn how to think, but learn how to answer questions. And the more accurate you are at answering questions, the more praise, and you know, the higher your chances of going higher are greater if you answer the questions right. It's not, and of course we're taught to think about things, but we're not really taught to think. Period. We're taught to think about things, but not very, not so much. Mostly it's rewards and punishments. And so that's how this conceptual framework gets exposed. Okay, then samskara is the next klesha, or the next skanda. This is it's what's called samskara and Sanskrit, and it's in the 12 links of interdependence. It's, you know, the first link of interdependence is ignorance. The second link is this one, skanda, is this skanda. It has it's right up there right after ignorance. So it's a very important topic. It's formation. What does he call it here? Perception, conditioning factors. Actually, this is the act of pulling all of the above together. This is the aggregator. It's the aggregation. It's not the factors. It's the act of aggregating. It's called formation. Now, bringing into being, both mind and body, bringing things into being. This is where action occurs, karma. Now we start to act. kind of as a real definition, we can say that formation is that which gathers up things and forms them into an aggregate. Like if you were pouring a handful of rice to make a pile, and it was that act. That's the samskara. That's the formation. Those factors of the mind that cause aggregation into taking rebirth. The subsequent aggregation of various forms of the 5 heaps of that rebirth and the dissolution of that. These are the crucial or vital aspect that drives cycling through rebirths. So it's the second, it's right after ignorance. So, and it's due to ignorance that they're produced in the mind and function to sow karmic seeds in our mind. That's why karma starts in the mind and functions. And karma begins in the mind and is reflected in speech and body. So this is what the samskara, they say, this is what makes things makes things which don't actually exist arise anyway. Conditioning factors, the samskara, formations. And since they also, those things that arise anyway, even though they don't exist, then they change. And they become something else and become the cause of more things. It's a karmic activity. So we can understand certain things, certain karmic things through inference. Inference, you know, we see smoke, maybe fire. We can understand these things that way. Like we see a flower, I can infer that it came from a seed. Or if I see a seed, I can infer that it will turn into a flower. And the more information I get, the more data I get, or the more closely I watch, the more that inference can become certainty. But karma is very subtle. So that whether we like it or not, a seed will produce its result, whether we like it or not. That's why we say the results are inevitable. And everything arises only through causes and conditions. So on the one hand, from a Buddhist or from the Buddha Dharma, there's no creator of things. And on the other hand, since everything arises only through causes and conditions, infallibly and inevitably, there's no need for something outside creator. It'll happen anyway. So, and then also, there's formations, there's karmic formations, aspect, the skandha is constantly operating. It operates continuously. On this subtle mental level, we might have to wait for a seed to show its result, or to in the outer world, it takes time and conditions. But inwardly, those causes and conditions are constantly busy. So the first meditation experience that people generally have is that they can't meditate because there's too much happening. Because here, the point is to see that. That would be good if you could see that. Then you examine it and determine that it's empty of nature, of its own nature. That stream of thoughts, or that isolated thought, or that drama, or that whatever's going on, that scenario, or whatever form your thoughts take, that at no time does it ever have its own nature, its emptiness. And then accept that. And then again and again. So we do have to learn how to concentrate and introspectively to be able to carry out Avalokiteshvara's advice to someone who wants to understand Prajnaparamita. Because this is how you do it. So you need all this stuff. And like we say in the Vajrayana, emotions through certain causes and conditions or whatever, things get very powerful in the mind. And it's taught how, therefore, the realization is more powerful, more all-pervasive. So we can, and that's something that, that's a private operation, a private activity. With others, we can't imagine. Well, we can imagine, but we can't talk about, we can't see what others are, what's forming with others, these infinitesimal and minutest time instances, trillions and billions of them all coming together and separating continually. And every once in a while, something pops out of their mouth, or something, they project their version of the world, but we can't account for others. We can only try to account for our own. Otherwise, we infer, oh, they said that about me, we can infer that they hated me. But it's just so irrelevant, really. It's just such a shot in the dark, because there's millions of things going on continuously, and then stuff just falls out, and so we can't make any assumptions about others. Yeah, that's where our training, and here we're talking always about the absolute nature, and we need to also have this compassion. Yeah, great compassion. Compassion with no expectations, no justification. We uh, shouldn't have to be justified in being compassionate. Just completely open-ended compassion. Okay, now we get to the fifth skandha, consciousness. Now things start to, now there's the various, and this is an aggregate. It's not like there is this thing called consciousness. That's what we're trying to antidote, that that karmic formation of thinking that way. So when we talk about consciousness, even though all these other factors are in the mental world, and they're not independent of each other, they're all interacting with each other interdependently, not necessarily in the same order. So consciousness, vijñā, are as an aggregate, they are consciousnesses, let's say. Consciousnesses are the different awarenesses of the dualistic mind which know an object directly. It knows its object, their object. And there are of course, the previous consciousness, third and fourth consciousness, arise in concert with this skandha, arises from it. Different ways of in basic early Buddhist approach, or in the basic Buddhist approach, there's the six consciousnesses. And in the one school of Mahayana, which now it becomes sort of the standard Mahayana analysis, is 8 consciousnesses, which includes the alaya consciousness. Alaya means the foundational consciousness, the neutral, I think you could say that maybe the neutral, the neutral state of mind before anything occurs, that also has a certain uncertainty to it, a vague uncertainty. It can seem like emptiness sometimes, but it's not really lucid. It doesn't have certainty, which is a certain quality, not certainty about decision necessarily. Anyway, so you can include that here or not. I don't think it's going to matter. But from this alaya, speaking of it, actually, everything I've mostly as a Mahayana background, and then there's 8 consciousnesses, natural. Talk about this alaya consciousness. Which is empty by nature. So if you happen to get consumed by alaya consciousness, then there's remedies. It's a problem. I mean, it's not. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, alaya is neutral.
Alaya is not positive or negative, but it is something that can be an object of mental consciousness. It's this what's called the all of our formations are there as potential in the alaya, and so it's associated with karma and karmic formations and where things might come from for the dualistic mind. So they arise, we say, from the alaya. When certain causes and conditions are there, then they manifest. Oh. Okay. So there's one for each. One consciousness is associated with each sensor. Sensor. There's like sensor. Like there's sense organs, and then there's this sensor, and then there's the consciousness, the I, and then the I faculty, and then the I consciousness. So they interdependently cause us to see. Like our eyeball doesn't see anything. It's just the open gateway of light that triggers, that sparks consciousness. There's a sparker, and it sparks. We'll get into that later. But there's this consciousness that each is associated with an organ that also perceives an object. So there's 18, right? That makes 6 senses, and then 6 objects for each sense, and then 6 consciousnesses for each sense. There's 18. So each one arises in the presence of certain causes and conditions, and they reflect our experience. Consciousness is what reflects as an experience. So when we sleep, then mental consciousness is working. None of the other consciousnesses are functioning. Even if you sleep with your eyes open, some people do that, and your eye consciousness is not activated, you could say. So these are this skandha is this aggregation. This aggregate is it's built on billions and billions of moments, of instants of change, movement, and throughout the three times, past, present, and futures. Everything is in a constant state of movement, and there's no single thing that's moving or that is unchanging, moving. That's the point. It's like a river. Superficially, or on a map, or when you're standing looking down at a river, it looks like a strip of tinfoil, something. It looks like a strip of a thing. Oh, there's a river. It's got a name. Is that this river, or is that river? Are we there, or are we, So we have these need to pinpoint the skandha, previous skandha. Then, if we look at the river, the closer you get, the more you see there's no river. There's water moving. And even you look closer, and there's closer and closer, and there's not even moving water. There's just continuously moving particles. And then further and further, H2O, I think everybody knows that practically. H2O, and it's not even water. It's like hydrogen and oxygen. H2, two oxygen, two hydrogen, one oxygen molecule. And then those also, anyway, this way. The river hasn't disappeared, but it has basically ceased to exist as a river. And nothing's gone. So it's like that. And the whole time, you're never you never discover something that's river. The river is a concept. It's all interdependent with the slope of the land, the elevation, the tipping, the rock, all this stuff, the steepness, everything. It's just the formation of the moment of that. Sometimes swells, gets big, sometimes gets a little trickle. Sometimes we say, oh, now there's no water in the river anymore because of the drought. There's no water, they give it the name, like the Hudson River, there's no water. But there's still the concept of the river's there. There's no water, so there's no, yeah. So all skandhas are compounded and interdependent. And they interact. They're interdependent. Each thing depends for something else, for its seeming arisal. And that arising is interdependent with other factors that seem to give it duration, when in fact there is no duration. There's no such thing as duration. And the skandhas are, like I said, they're at no time is a sentient being not in the skandhas. The skandhas are always operating. Like again, there's no samsara other than the skandhas. It's not like there's the skandhas and then there's samsara. Skandhas are samsara. We never exist outside the skandhas. That's what I mean. The skandhas are the enablers of clinging. The enablers of clinging, which means they're the enablers of pain. Also, they are the key to liberation. So when we consider these, when we examine things and use these things, then what Avalokiteshvara was saying becomes clear, becomes a teaching. The nature, this emptiness, is not something that's added or not something that is made. Just like when you want to cook something outdoors, you gather the wood and create the conditions for a fire to come. Once the fire comes, then you don't also have to get heat. It comes with it. Fire is by nature, that's the nature, is hot. It's not added to fire. Like wetness and water. Wetness is the nature. The nature of water is wetness. So the nature of all phenomena is emptiness. So this word that's used here is key. The five aggregates are empty of self-nature, or that their nature is emptiness, shunyata. Form is emptiness, kind of deconstructs and form. It seems to exist without examination. But what is its nature? So our analysis, our ability to, our analysis and examination and the form that's being examined mix with emptiness. Form is emptiness. That's what that means. Is means not to. not like. It's not like emptiness. It's not becomes emptiness. It's not it used to be empty and now I need to make it empty again by examining it. It is, say, form is emptiness. So understand that aspect. So in proportion to, or when we understand that, when we understand that emptiness, that form is emptiness, then we become liberated, then our clinging dissolves. That clinging dissolves. The form is still, actually, they say, like Rinpoche, Dr. Rinpoche said, emptiness means everything, full, complete. Understanding emptiness means not clinging. Not understanding emptiness means clinging. Not clinging is blissful. Clinging is painful. We're liberated from clinging to forms and we experience them as what we would say is merely appearing, not solidly existing, illusory appearances. And also then the second emptiness is not other than form. Emptiness can't be separated from form. The nature of emptiness is to have form. Both coexist. So this liberates us from the extreme view of non-existence, of nihilism. Form is empty, emptiness is form. And of course, here then, because this is a short sutra, and longer sutras, it'll go down all these details. Everything is, form is empty, all these different details, sensations, empty, emptiness is sensation. And form is not other than emptiness. It liberates us from believing that there are two different independent entities that are joined together. You're not adding one and one. Form is not other, or emptiness is not other than form. So again, there's always this caution or this of extreme. And in Buddhist terminology, extreme view means holding that things exist, holding that things don't exist. So form is not other than emptiness, liberates us from thinking that there are two different things that we, through our meditation, somehow have managed to get together. I mean, these are things that will come up. It's not like, oh, only idiots think that way. But these are things, so we need to recollect again and again, because we'll if you practice in this way, we'll probably encounter that attitude as being some kind of accomplishment, then, I mean, it is, then, and also form is not other than emptiness. Thinking that both existence and non-existence both exist. Both exist. And emptiness is not other than form, is both views of existence and non-existence are still clung to as still cling to existence and non-existence, both as not existing. Excuse me. I think that things don't exist, nor do they not exist. So this cuts our ability to hold on to any position. I mean, carrying out these axioms cuts through our ability to hold on to any position and then just rest in equanimity. That kind of equanimity, equipoise. So these four axioms are all possibilities that we can think. That covers every way we could think about things. Check it out. See if there's a fifth. Here it says there's not. So this true nature also then is beyond words, beyond our imagination. It's not a product that we'll arrive at. If so, then it's something that our ordinary mind could express. So all five of these aggregations are all the same in that way. That the same. There's not different emptinesses. You're always coming to the same emptiness, which is the nature of all phenomena. So there. Then let's see. Then we can think about the two truths, relative truth and absolute truth. Here. To what we would say like ordinary mind or a mundane mind. There's separate truths. They're not connected. We have an independent, solid external world. Generally, when our experience is really one of being in this external world, and it's so demanding. I mean, and it's the demands of the external world are not new. We have our version of the demandingness of it, but people have always had to be on their toes in the world. That's not new. So, so there's always this sense of the external world and me, my inner world, as being two distinct things. So by the more we approach this idea, the more we approach the emptiness, then the difference between inner and outer is not so distinct anymore. And that sense of inner and outer, that's not just the sum total of duality. Duality, of course, happens even within, but that's the beginning of the erosion of that habit of dualistic ordinary mind. I'm not sure. But
you said dualism,
dualism is a habit. It's that formations. And so by again and again becoming familiar with, through repetition and through insight into the empty nature of the skandhas, which we could call the relative truth, we begin to see that relative truth and absolute truth are not distinct, that the outer world of forms and the inner world of mentation, of thinking, are not two distinct things. We're capturing and accepting the nature of all of that, of all phenomena. And it happens in a step by step way. That's the bodhisattva path, isn't it? When we take the vow, we say, I will practice in a step-by-step manner, inch by inch. And inch by inch means moment, capturing moments, through the paramitas, the previous paramitas of generosity, discipline, patience, and meditation, diligence, and so forth. That's why, like in the 9th chapter, the wisdom chapter, or Bodhicharya Vitara, it says all of the previous was for this, for the wisdom, prajna paramita. So it happens step by step. So each skandha can be reduced to its starting point of consciousness. And everything starts from the mind. Mind is the highest principle, you could say. It's the chief of samsara, chief of nirvana. Tumbalami Sundaram Bhoje, the precious teacher of mind. What the mind says, I say, raise your hand, and my body raises its hand. So body is going to obey mind, or it's going to follow the orders of mind. Speech follows the orders of mind. Speech doesn't act independent of mind. Body doesn't act independent of mind until death. That's when a body doesn't obey the mind, is when at death. Then this next section, O Shariputra, thus all phenomena are emptiness. They're without characteristics, unborn, unceasing, immaculate, and free of flaws. They do not diminish and they do not increase. So these are now specific ways that things exist. From the relative point of view, things have characteristics: shape, color, size, name, so forth. They exist in time. They have a beginning. They have a birth. They have a previous cause for those qualities, those characteristics. So from a relative point of view, and also from a relative point of view, things have characteristics, things are born, and or become, and that things cease, things end, and they become the seeds for something else to come, something else to arise. So things have these, they have characteristics. They exist in time, and they end. And they end their present mode and become something else, or become the seeds of something else. They don't become something else. They become the seeds of something else. So really, there's not a clear line of demarcation in reality between causes and effects. As a way of speaking, we can speak to divide it up, to be able to understand karma and actions, but in what do we say, real time, causes are effects. Effects become, they are causes. So here it says, they're without characteristics. So we examine those characteristics and see that those characteristics are empty by nature. They have no inherent existence of their own. Color, shape, identifying characteristics, things that help us to know what other things are. Those characteristics have no, their nature is emptiness. They have no characteristics, actually, ultimately speaking, and unborn and unceasing. There. Things don't, let's say, where is it? Use my finger. Unborn. That's an interesting topic. If things don't exist in the moment that you analyze them, only things that exist can be born. So we say it's unborn. See? Only if something is a result can it have a cause. Only if something exists can it stop existing, can it cease. That's why in the, I don't know, Vajrayana or no, in the Sutrayana, Mahayana, the thing is to recognize and grow accustomed to and realize and fully accomplish the unborn nature of mind. That's the it doesn't die because it's unborn. Mind is not something that's subject to birth and death, and to accomplish that mind, not that aspect of, to accomplish that empty nature of that mind is to be free of birth and death. That's the idea. Immaculate means actually it says, you know, it says here immaculate and free of flaws. Actually, it's more like it's not impure, nor is it free of impurities. There's some difference. Immaculate here means that it's free from impurity. Here, impurity and flaws is the same, is using the same term. So it's not impure, nor is it something that was made to be not pure. not impure. It's not free from impurity. It goes beyond. Flaws or impurities that dissolve with analysis. So by analyzing it, we can see that it hasn't become free of flaws, hasn't become pure, because it never was impure in the first place. So there are no purities to purify or to make something pure or flawless. Purity depends on impurity. Right? And the mundane, this is all relative and absolute truth, kind of interpenetrating here. From the relative point of view, something is impure, we want it to be pure, so we act in a way that it becomes purified. But this nature was never pure or impure, beyond pure and impure, so there's nothing to do. And then does not diminish and do not increase, has to do with sort of the unquantifiability, the unquantifiable nature. It won't get, if we realize emptiness, that doesn't make it bigger. And if we get distracted, it hasn't shrunk. Does not diminish, not increase, that idea. It's unchangeable. It doesn't even, like whether even if you realize it or not, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't increase. The nature, emptiness doesn't increase when you realize it. The change that occurs is on the diminishment of ignorance. But emptiness itself, it doesn't have that character, it doesn't have any characteristics that would be harmed or helped by anything you do. So to realize this, to recognize this, then it is obscured right now to some, full or some measure. So without diminishing or sidestepping the absolute truth, we do need to train in compassion and in analysis to discover the truth of relative existence, which is that's our starting point. Again, if we start with enlightenment as a starting point, then it's just sort of becomes a religion or a philosophy. That's one of the beauties of Buddha's teaching. The first thing he talked about was suffering. It's like if you go to a doctor and all they talk about is how great it is to be healthy. Like, what good is that? You want a diagnosis, and you want a cause, and you want a treatment, and you want to be assured that that treatment has some history of working. Yeah. And so this last paragraph on the page here is, oh, Shariputra, therefore with emptiness, there's no form, there's no sensation, no perception, no mental states, and no consciousness. So then he's summing it up in that way there. Then there are no senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, or discursive mind. There's no form, no sounds, no odors, no taste, no tactile sensations, and no concept. So then we could touch for a short time on that. There's so much detail here. I don't know, maybe there's no concepts. Did I read that? There's neither ignorance nor the absence of ignorance, and so forth, including neither aging and death nor the absence of aging and death. So here he's talking about, of course, that last bit, ignorance nor the absence of ignorance and so forth, including neither aging and death. That's a concise version of what I referred to earlier as the 12 links of interdependent causation. And you can look it up. It includes some of the skandhas. I think, I don't know, it seems like Buddha thought of those 12 links of interdependence. Because that's how things happen. You know, from ignorance, it goes this way. Even the first turning of the wheel, he discussed these 12 links of interdependence that end with birth and then suffering and death. And so and it starts with ignorance, then karmic formations, consciousness, and so forth. More details. Then he's clumped them together. He aggregated them into 5 and gave them, okay, these are the 5 important things to understand. So we have, ignorance, then these formative formations, formations, habit forms, and consciousness, then name and form, and then the 6 senses then arise on that basis. Then on that basis, we make contact. And then on that basis, there's feeling, the same feeling as we talked about. And then there's like this kind of thirst. That feeling needs to be satisfied. So then there's clinging. And then with clinging, then there's that urge to becoming. And then there's birth, and then there's the end of birth. Birth is death. So each one is dependent on the previous. Death, the cause of death is birth. There's all these details, but basically there's one fundamental cause of death, and that's birth. And that's what Buddha originally set out. That was his thing, was set out, I must stop taking birth. He had that much, in kind of a karmically, he had that much confidence that mind didn't die, and that it would only be to discover and release this absolute nature from the limitations of birth and death was his project. That was enlightenment. It didn't have it's not like a suicidal mission. That's or a nihilistic idea. But that in the absence of birth is enlightenment, with all the qualities of enlightenment, all the qualities of emptiness, basically all the qualities of emptiness is unobstructed compassion, unqualified compassion. So these are these 12 nidanas, 12 links of interdependent causation, where you start to deconstruct each one, and it's like a domino effect. It goes back to ignorance. So that those was here. It says no sensitive sight, hearing, so no forms, no sounds, no all this no stuff. These all have to do with seeing the emptiness. Okay, practice seeing the emptiness of the sense fields, that belong to the consciousnesses, and then there's this sort of sparking system that activates the consciousness when the organ makes contact with the object. So there's these inner, what's called inner, outer, and secret elements. The outer elements are the organs of sight, hearing, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind or brain. And then there's the six what did it say? The outer elements are the form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental, what is it called? Concepts, or mental, called dharmas. Elements here doesn't mean like earth, fire. It means dhatu, called dhatus. And then there's each one has its it's in between thing. It's like the piezo. What is it? Piezo. Those things that make a spark. Mm-hmm. You got the gas, and then the piezo. You go, tuk, tuk, and then it sparks and it comes. Same like a piezo is like the vision comes to the eyeball, but then the eyeball there's a faculty there. There's a power there that sparks the consciousness, the visual consciousness, and then you see. And the visual consciousness talks to the brain, mental consciousness, the organ, same. So all these consciousnesses are solely a function of the mental organ, the brain. And it does all that before we construct our awareness of our ordinary mundane awareness. So the mental consciousness transform those senses into information. The brain, the mental organ takes all that data or the energy and transforms it into information. And so then mental consciousness from the brain and mental consciousness is established. And we project our version of confusion, of our own personal branded, or our own personal brand of delusion, which we take to be the world, our reality. All is by nature emptiness. So that, anyway, then Anyway, this one here now, it says, similarly, there's no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, and no path, no time. That first sentence there refers to what I mentioned earlier, where we have the ground, path, and fruition. So now they're saying that the path to enlightenment is empty by nature. The first noble truth. The truth of suffering is emptiness by nature. The truth of the cause of suffering is emptiness. The truth of the cessation is emptiness. The path is emptiness. The Eightfold Noble Path is emptiness. Training and discipline is by nature emptiness. Training in samadhi is emptiness. Training and prajna is emptiness. Those three trainings of the Eightfold Noble Path. That's everything is emptiness. There is no such a thing as a path. The path is by nature emptiness. It can be a path that leads further and deeper into the suffering of samsara, or it can be a path that leads to the discovery and accomplishment of emptiness, of the truth. But the path has no inherent existence of its own. So it's wonderful to have a path so that you can then analyze that path to see if it actually is real or not, or whether it's just a temporary way to accomplish its own truth, its own emptiness, its own nature. If we can do that, our practice will get much more relaxed. Effort is by nature emptiness. All, like it's, even Shanti Devi, even 9th chapter, he starts out saying that all that was for this prajna paramita, but still he peppered in or interspersed in these comments in every chapter about the wisdom aspect. So it's not, wisdom is not something that you get rewarded with at the end of a long, torturous, difficult path. The path is the goal. The path, it has that empty nature. That is the goal. That's why in the 7-point mind training, the first point is, as you know, or the second, the first main point is the absolute bodhicitta. We need to have some flavor of that. We need to have some sniff, some smell of that, so that our practice doesn't get hard and stiff. Just like we can do Vajrayana generation stage practice, thinking of the illusory forms and self-visualization and all that. Then when we're done, we just go back to our ordinary solid reality habit. We're not going to get anywhere. We need to undermine our mundane relative reality. Relative reality is not, I don't know, man, I'm going out on a relative limb, but we shouldn't think of it as a stepping stone to awakening. It's a completely infallible path. I have to trust that. But it's by nature, it's emptiness. And to realize that is the way to practice. It's like in our Nyingma ways, generation stage practice. The first thing is what? First meditation in the development of the deity is Om Mahashunyata Jnana Benza Svabhava. Yeah. Everything is emptiness. Then seed syllable and so forth and so on. We should never abandon that first. Like meditating on forms shouldn't cancel, shouldn't replace or push aside that first emptiness samadhi. Anyway, the mantra, we'll just jump to the mantra. Anyway, that similarly, no suffering, no origin, blah, blah, blah. That's the meditation on the emptiness of the path, to sum it up. And then it says, there's no timeless awareness, no attainment, no lack of attainment. That's practicing the emptiness, if we analyze that sentence, and that is the goal. The goal of the path doesn't go beyond emptiness. It's emptiness also. There is no such thing associated. Attainment, timeless awareness are not something. They are inseparable from emptiness. O Shariputra, therefore, there is no attainment for bodhisattvas. They abide instead by relying on the sublime knowing, and so on and so forth. Yes. Then the mantra, I don't know, I should say something. There's one commentary I saw on the mantra, just so that maybe you know these, but mantra, gate gate para samgate bodhi soha. So, of course, tayata is just an introduction, it's not a word. It's like it says, das, or something like that. And it appears in the sutras often. Gate means to go, is a Sanskrit mantra. It means to go. And the first one is your willingness to begin the path to awakening. Gate. Like I always think of it like Rinpoche's book, Gates to Buddhist Practice. Gate to Buddhist Practice. It's like the first gate, the first gate is that's what that first term used. Then this second gate has to do with willingness to progress, willingness to advance, which has to do with really the path of application. The first path is a path of accumulation, which is where we're at kind of in our practice, is the path of accumulation. First gate is that. And the second gate is a willingness to go beyond the first path into the path of application, or also called the path, sometimes it's called joining. It joins you with the third path, which is the path of seeing, which is paragate, supreme going. Paragate is supreme going. So that's your intention to advance to the third path of seeing, where you are, that's the first bodhisattva level, where you no longer take rebirth through karma. Then parasamgate is the supreme perfect going, which is the rest of the more sublime stages of the bodhisattva's development. And then bodhi means enlightenment itself, path of no more learning. Soha means so be it, or it is so. So be it. Yeah, soha, so be it. Gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. So that's sort of markers for the 5 paths on the bodhisattva path. And then it ends with the Shariputra being encouraged again by Avalokiteshvara, saying, "O Shariputra, thus a great and courageous bodhisattva should train in the perfection of sublime knowing." What it comes down to is that word courageous. Like bodhisattva, mahasattva. This is mahasattva, it is courageous. Sentient beings are infinite. Courage has to be infinite. Can't be overly small-minded, concerned with only a countable number of people. Okay, so we'll end here. Okay. Hopefully I at least gave you some food for thought. It's not, it would certainly be worth your while to, now that we've thrown these we've been introduced to these terms, if you haven't already, then at least when you look up, when you want to do some studies in the Abhidharma, which, well, it's quite vast and complex sometimes, but it's as a meditator, there are certain things that it will really help your actual meditation, which is to, and by meditation, I usually define meditation as being knowing what's going on. Usually we meditate throughout the day and we don't know what's going on. So, and then so to reduce samsara, not reduce, yeah, to kind of reduce samsara into 5 skandhas that's what the Buddha did as a way to understand the path of awakening, is to all of samsara can all be subsumed under these 5 skandhas. There's nothing that happens that's not included in those aggregations.